I found out my brother gave my wedding ring to his new girlfriend, then told me get over it. I'm Mara, 30 years old, and I'm a bench jeweler, one of those people who spends entire afternoons hunched over a flame, coaxing metal to listen, coaxing stones to sit straight like little planets in orbit, and I swear to you I felt something in my chest ping out of alignment the moment I saw the Instagram photo of my brother's new girlfriend holding up her hand in the afternoon sun with my ring, catching light like it recognized me more than it recognized her. And if you think I'm exaggerating, tell me you've never photographed a piece you made or wore for years and then seen it out in the wild on the wrong hand, wrong story, wrong caption. Tell me you wouldn't feel your ribcage clench around a missing thing and say in its own language, bring it back. I know metals by smell and memory. I can tell sterling from white gold by the way it warms under a buffing wheel. I can find the microscratch pattern left by a callous polish like a fingerprint. So when I tell you I knew it was mine even before I zoomed in, believe me. But I zoomed anyway because hope makes fools and detectives of all of us, and there it was. The tiny crescent chip on the inner prong from the time I smacked my hand against a church pew at my cousin's baptism, and the slightly crooked and in the laser-engraved M and Eli inside the band, the ampersand that always leaned as if it had a secret, the one I used to rub with my thumb when I was pretending to be calm at work while someone was telling me a story about proposing on a cliff or losing a ring at the bottom of a lake, and the caption said, "When a man just knows, thank you Sam, my heart is yours," with 3 sparkling heart emojis like confetti. And if you're mentally rearranging letters right now, yes, Sam is my brother. The ring was not just a ring. I guess it never is, and it's corny to say that out loud, but it matters here. It was the one Eli and I picked on a brutal July afternoon when the city smelled like hot metal and cut grass and we were giddy on iced coffee and the idea of forever. The center stone was a modest old European cut I'd rescued from a broken Victorian brooch, plump facets like honeycomb, the kind that throws warm light instead of cold fire, and I set it in a low 6-prong crown because I'm practical and I work with my hands. Tall settings in my job mean snagging gloves and sliced nitrile. I'd carved a whisper of wheat under the gallery, a nod to the farm Eli grew up on, and I'd inlaid a tiny sliver of rose gold inside the otherwise white gold band, a secret sunrise. We didn't have fancy money, but I had skill, and I told him let me build it, and he said build us, and I did, and we got married, and for 3 years I never took that ring off unless a customer's setting was throwing burrs and I didn't want to scratch it, and then Eli and I, being human the messy way humans are, came apart. Not dramatically, not with betrayal or courtroom battles, but with misaligned calendars and the slow, stupid misunderstandings that wear down kindness like water on stone. We tried counseling. We mapped our fights. We wrote letters to the ghost of who we'd been. In the end, we divorced with tears and goodwill and a box of shared kitchen utensils split like a treaty. The ring went into the little ceramic dish on my nightstand, and sometimes I slipped it on when I missed easy laughter, not because I wanted him back, I don't do revisionist history, but because I wanted the version of me who had chosen something bravely. When I started dating again, I stopped wearing it. It felt like telling the wrong story with my hand. And to Sam. If you have a brother who is both a charmer and a catastrophe, you'll understand the rhythm. Charisma first, clean up later. He's a year younger than me, tall, a bartender with a jawline that forgives him more than I think is fair, the kind of guy who can make a room feel like a party and leave a soot ring in the sink where his promises used to be. Our childhood was a half-finished deck and a mom who managed to make Tuesday dinners taste like gratitude and a dad who left when I was 15 with the kind of quiet that says I don't owe you explanation. I learned to solder and Sam learned to be liked. He's not a bad person, he's a soft person in a hard container, easily dented, prone to blaming the shelf. After his last breakup, messy because the last ones always are, he moved into my granny flat while he got back on his feet, which translated to spent 6 months telling me this time the band would hire him as a manager. I gave him keys, a chore list because I refused to mother, and the Wi-Fi password because I'm not a monster. We were fine, the way you're fine with someone you love who has a PhD in avoiding consequences. 3 weeks before the Instagram photo, I noticed my nightstand dish was lighter. I was getting ready for work, hair in a bun, apron still draped over the chair, and I reached for the ring the way I reach for chapstick, habit more than hunger, and my fingers met empty ceramic. At first I laughed. I am a jeweler. Jewelers misplace small, bright things more often than we admit because brains are sometimes a drawer you forget to close. I checked the bathroom, the sink trap, the pockets of the hoodie I wore when I watched TV under a blanket like a burrito. I checked the studio upstairs, where my bench lives under a lamp like a sun, metal filings glittering in a drift that would impress a magpie. I checked the little zip bag where I keep customer stones overnight, labeled, dated, paranoid. Nothing. A thin thread of panic started to tug under my sternum. I texted Eli because you do odd things when anxiety drives. Hey, this is a weird question, but did I ever give you my ring to hold? He replied fast, because he is still kind. Nope. Do you want me to come help look? I told him no, told him sorry for the weird, told myself to breathe. I went to work where I held other people's diamonds with tweezers while I pictured mine in the mouth of the vacuum cleaner like a terrible pearl. That night I asked Sam, keeping my tone as casual as unpainted walls. Hey, have you seen my wedding ring? He shrugged, offended by implication even when none had been offered. Why would I have your ring? I laughed like that made perfect sense. No idea. I'm just asking everyone. He was texting while he said, nope, thumbs moving with the ease of a man who believes in second chances without counting first ones. The photo landed on a Sunday, that quiet part of afternoon when the sun feels like your aunt who pinches cheeks. I was at my kitchen table working on estimates, the unglamorous part of jewelry, gold prices, time conversions, the math that turns sparkly into invoices, when my friend Sienna sent a screenshot. Sienna is barback royalty and knows everything before it hits the ground. Isn't this Sam's new girl, she wrote. She's a server at Tully's. Also, that looks like your ring. I felt my throat do the dry snap thing you learn to recognize in first aid class before people faint. I stared and then, with the stubbornness of someone who wants an alternate ending, I told myself maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I was a narcissist who thinks every six-pronged crown is hers. So I did what any forensic metalhead would do. I printed the photo, I pulled out my loupe, and I compared angles. The little nick on the inside prong. The exact wheat pattern undergallery that I'd carved in a moment of sappy genius. The lean of that ampersand. People think rings are generic unless they live with them. I live with them. This one told me her face, and her face was mine. I didn't DM the girl. I walked out the back door and crossed the narrow yard to the granny flat where Sam was playing something loud enough to be an alibi. I kept my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't do something dramatic with them. He answered in a t-shirt that said do good and boxes that said I do what I want without saying it. Hey, I said, and my voice sounded like I'd set it on a table for a minute and forgot it. We need to talk. He flopped onto his thrift couch and gestured like he was magnanimous. Shoot. I held up the printout. He grinned the way he does when a server brings extra fries. Right? She's gorgeous. I touched the tiny nick on the paper. That's my ring, Sam. He went still just enough to tell me he knew I was right. Then he shrugged, a move I have seen on him since he was 5, and knocked over a lamp and said the dog did it. Mara, you weren't even wearing it, he said. It was collecting dust. I felt heat hit the back of my neck like a slap. It belonged to me, I said, careful, because when I get hurt, my words sharpen and I don't like the cuts they make. It's my property. Also my history. He rolled his eyes. It's a ring. You're so dramatic. Get over it. People toss that phrase into the air like it's confetti. Get over it. As if grief is a hurdle on a track you can simply 1, 2, 3 your knees over if you have the right playlist. The thing about get over it is that it reveals not me but you. Your impatience. Your fear that my pain makes demands on your comfort. It's an eraser shaped like advice. I took a breath that tasted like pennies. When did you take it? He didn't meet my eyes. Borrowed, he corrected, committed to delusion. Last week. I was going to tell you. Were you also going to return it? He smiled like I'd been funny. She loves it, Mara. It looks better on her. You'd want it to be loved. I had a momentary, ridiculous vision of taking a soldering torch to that sentence. You gave my wedding ring to your girlfriend, I said, flat because flat is safer than sharp. That's not a thing you get to do. He leaned back, hands laced behind his head like men in cartoons. Come on. You work with these all day. You can make another one. I could feel the part of me that was big sister Flair, the part that has for years cleaned his messes, bought his I swear I'll pay you back bus tickets, explained his feelings to our mother as if they were foreign policy. That part wanted to keep him from seeing the consequences coming like bad weather. Another part of me, the woman who has been building an adult life from actual pieces, said, no more. You'll give it back, I said. Today. We can go together. I'll help you talk to her. His mouth twisted into something mean. You always need to be the hero, he said, which is an interesting accusation from someone who had my ring on his girlfriend's finger. It's not yours anymore. She said yes. It's ours. And honestly, and he really did this, he laughed, your marriage didn't exactly work out. Maybe it's good luck if it gets a second chance. There are moments when your muscles remember their jobs. Mine is a small, strong body from years of filing, hammering, lifting waxes, and holding my shoulder at angles Osha would frown at. I leaned over his coffee table, put both palms down, and said very calmly, Sam, I want my ring back. He shrugged again, a broken metronome. Get over it, he repeated, because some sentences feel good to people who don't want to do the harder work of another one. I left before my mouth said something that would become family legend. I went back to my kitchen and wrote everything down because when a person gaslights you, evidence becomes oxygen. Date, time, screenshot printed and labeled, description of ring including the GIA inscription number on the girdle of the center stone because yes, I had recorded it, I am that person and God bless that person. I texted Eli again, emergency question. Could you please send me the purchase receipt PDF you kept for the stone appraisal? I'm dealing with a situation. He replied, sending now. Are you okay? I told him the truth, not yet. I called a cop friend I do charity work with, Jules, whose humor is an antidote and whose patience is a miracle. Do I have to file a report, I asked, or is there a better path? She asked a lot of questions. Was Sam on my lease? No. Had he been given the ring? Absolutely not. Did I have proof of ownership? Yes, in triplicate and in my bones. You can absolutely file a theft report, she said. But know that it will blow up Thanksgiving. Sometimes returning a ring with a police escort ruins the Instagram vibe. It already did, I said. She snorted. I mean for them. She paused. Do you want to give him a chance to fix it before I put on the hat? I did. Despite anger, despite everything, I wanted my brother to choose right without being forced. I texted him, you have 24 hours to return the ring. After that, I file a police report for theft. This is not a negotiation. He left me on read. It will not shock you to learn my hands shook while I did dishes that night, scrubbing a pan like it had lied to me. The next morning, I went to work because making things calms me, and halfway through setting a sapphire into a bezel for a woman celebrating 5 years sober, I decided I could also be creative about this. Rings are social creatures. They show up in places, bars, kitchens, yoga studios, the front seat of cars while people are crying into drive-through fries. Sam's girlfriend, according to her caption trail, taught a Tuesday class at a studio called Asana and Espresso and worked nights at Tully's. I do not do stakeouts because I am not a TV person, but I do have a lunch break and we all get to be petty sometimes. I packed a velvet pouch, my loop, the appraisal copy, and the photo, and I went to the studio, registering for a beginner class with the kind of humility you get when you know your hamstrings are liars. She didn't recognize me at the desk because Instagram filters are kind to chaos. The class was slow. The room smelled like lavender and ambition. Her voice was lovely, calm in a way I envy. I felt like an intruder and also like a plaintiff. After, as people rolled up mats with the relieved chatter of those who have done their penance for the day, I stood near the cubbies until she walked by, that ring throwing sun across her fingers as if it were pleased to be caught. Hi, I said, and when she looked up her face did the quick unblinking thing of someone who has to remember where she's seen you before. I'm Mara, I said. Sam's sister. Her smile faltered for one beat and then reset like a device. Oh. Hi. I've heard so much about you. I nodded at her hand. I like your ring. She lifted it, a fish who doesn't know the water. Isn't it beautiful, she said, and she meant it, and I had to swallow the bitter. It is, I said. I made it. She frowned. Sam said he bought it. From my house? I asked, not unkind. I took out the loop. Can I show you something? She hesitated and then, in that strange way women audition safety in microseconds, gave me her hand. I angled her finger toward the light, lifted the loop, and said, "See this tiny engraving inside the band? The ampersand that leans? I carved that. And do you see this? The inscription number on the diamond? It's in my appraisal folder. My ex-husband and I chose this stone. He bought it for our wedding. It belongs to me." Her eyes got that cloudy look people get when their story fogs. She pulled her hand back like it had burned. "Sam told me he inherited it from his grandmother," she whispered. "I closed my eyes the way you do when you hit your funny bone and it's not funny." "He didn't," I said. "It's mine. I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to take back what was stolen." She stared at me, mouth parted, tears climbing fast. "I didn't know," she said, and I believed her because deceit has a smell and it wasn't on her. "I'm sorry," she added, the kind of sorry that apologizes not just for the event but for the lousy universe that made it possible. "I'll give it back." We walked outside together because the studio lobby is not a courtroom. She slid the ring off with a little mournful breath, and for a second I wanted to tell her to keep it because she looked like she needed something steady. But ownership matters, and I'm not a saint. I am a woman with a ledger of being taken from. I put the ring in my velvet pouch like a bird returning to a nest. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it with my whole throat. "I know this is awful." She wiped under her eyes with the heel of her hand in that way that makes a person look 5 for a second. "He told me he wanted me to have a story," she said. "He said the ring had one, and now I guess it does, just not the kind you brag about." She looked at me, pleading for something that was not mine to give. Should I break up with him? People assume jewelers specialize in forever. In fact, my days are full of beginnings and repairs. I don't counsel hearts unless asked, and even then I don't like the liability. "I can't tell you what to do," I said. "I can tell you that he crossed a line it takes some people years to see. I can also tell you that get over it is a sentence people use when they are hoping you will live smaller so they can live without consequence." She nodded, a little broken wing motion, and whispered, "I'm so embarrassed." I shook my head. "Be angry," I said. "Embarrassment is the bruise. Anger is the blood that tells you where the injury is." She huffed a laugh through a tear. "You talk like a jeweler," she said, and I realized I do. Metal metaphors cling. Sam waited until that night to call me, probably because he could feel the shape of his loss only when it touched him directly. "You had no right to ambush her," he started, skipping the hello the way men skip leg day. "You had no right to steal from me," I said, sitting at my bench and letting the comfort of tools line up in my periphery. I told her the truth. She gave me back my ring. He swore, slammed something, tried to pivot to a pity play. "You're ruining my life," he said, and I almost laughed because if retrieving what is mine is life-ruining, his architecture is made of paper. "I gave you 24 hours, I said evenly. "You chose not to fix it." "You could have made another one," he said, doubling down, committed to the wrong bit. "And you could have not taken what wasn't yours," I said, and the silence that followed told me we had entered the part of the conversation where he recognized the flaw. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "I didn't think you'd even notice," he said, and there it was, the thesis sentence of so many harms the victim won't notice. "I always notice," I said. "It's my job." I wish I could tell you that's where he apologized. It isn't. The next day my mother called, her voice thick with the worst kind of maternal resolve, the one that has to choose between children. "What happened?" she asked carefully. I told her, as gently as you can tell a person that one of their kids thought the other kid's memories were a free store. She sighed, long and low. "He says you embarrassed him," she said. "He says you went to her class." "Mom," I said, and I said it the way daughters do when they want to rewind to bubble baths and detangling spray. "He took something that wasn't his and then told me to get over it." She made that tiny sound I learned to listen for when I was 10, the sound that means I am trying to be fair in a world that asks women to balance men's comfort like a tea tray on their foreheads. I love you both, she said. I won't referee. But I also won't ask you to swallow this. It wasn't an apology on his behalf. It was better, it was refusal to pretend both sides weighed the same. The ring stayed in the pouch for a week because it felt hot to the touch with Story. I took it out every night and turned it in my palm, the faint patina where metal remembers skin, the small file mark only I would recognize. I considered resetting it, pulling the stone, building it new, but scrapping a setting feels like burning a house just because someone haunted it. Instead, I did something quieter and, for me, more radical. I took a fine needle burnisher and on the inner band across from the original engraving, I added another inscription, microscopic but legible, mine still. Not petty, not public, just a mark for my future self, the woman who might one day forget the boundary she drew and need a reminder that keeping your own things is not cruelty. Sam sulked. He posted a vague status about how some people hoard the past and got the kind of sympathy you get when you narrate yourself as the protagonist and leave out scene 2. His girlfriend, to her credit and pain, called me 3 days later and said, I broke up with him. He said I was dramatic. I said, get over it. It felt good and then it felt sad. I told her breakups are often both. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said maybe later because I have learned not to speed into friendship as penance. She said she understood and I think she did. The rest of the story is less fireworks, more carpentry. Sam didn't speak to me for a month. Then he texted that he was moving out, that he'd found a place with roommates and a cat named Tofu. I said I'd be there Tuesday with boxes. He said don't bother. I showed up anyway because I know him. He had 2 trash bags and a panic face. We moved his life into the back of a borrowed truck, and somewhere between my street and his new address he started to cry, furious at himself for doing it in front of me. You're still my sister, he said, like he was confessing a crime. I know, I said, because love is a nasty, sticky thing that clings even when it's gross. At the new place he handed me a small, folded piece of paper like it was an animal that might bite. I made you something, he said. He's not a jeweler, he is a person who makes mixtapes. It was a playlist obviously titled Get Over It but like with feelings, and I laughed so hard my chest hurt. You're an idiot, I told him, and he wiped his face and said, yeah. He didn't apologize then, not really. That came later, slowly, in installments. A text where he wrote, I was wrong, a phone call where he said, I thought because you're strong you could absorb my bad decisions. A Thanksgiving where he asked if he could bring the stuffing and then actually did. It is both infuriating and beautiful, the way growth insists on taking the stairs. I set boundaries I'd been too tired to set when we were younger. No borrowing valuables, no surprise guests, no asking me to explain him to people he disappointed. He broke a couple, caught himself, circled back. Our mother learned to say, that's between you two, and discovered it tasted like peace. Eli dropped by one afternoon with a bag of donuts and told me he was engaged to someone who made him laugh until he snorted. I hugged him and meant the happiness I felt. After he left, I took my ring out and wore it while I made dinner, not as a ghost or a grief, but as a piece of the person who built something once and can build again. I wish I could wrap this in a bow and call it a metaphor you can wear, but rings don't fix families, they just mark time while we try. If there's any neatness, it's this. Months later, a woman came into the shop with a ring that had been her grandmother's and a face that said she wasn't sure she was allowed to change old things. She said, it's not me, and I said, we can make it you without erasing her, and we did. We kept the stone, softened the shoulders, added a little engraving inside that said, ours still. She picked it up and cried in a way that felt like a window opening. After she left, I took out my ring and looked at mine still, and my hand didn't shake. I realized Get Over It had become something else in me, not a dismissal but a bridge. I didn't get over it. I got through it. I stepped onto the plank of evidence, the rail of anger that didn't rot into shame, the boards of boundaries, the rope of humor, the posts of help from people who actually help. On the other side was not a world where people don't take what isn't theirs. It was a world where I don't let them keep it. Last week, Sam came by with Tofu the cat in a backpack like he was transporting a rare plant, and he asked if I could look at a ring a customer had left at the bar. I kept it safe, he said, meaning look at me growing, and he had, and I patted his shoulder and didn't say hero or redemption because sometimes those words make people think they're done. We examined it together under the lamp. See this? I said, pointing to a tiny, distinctive scratch. This will help us tell the story right. He leaned in, paying a kind of attention I hadn't seen on him since he was 8 and trying to learn coin tricks. He said, I'm glad you saw it. I wouldn't have noticed. And I said, I always notice, and this time it didn't land like accusation. It landed like a job description and a promise. That night, when the shop was quiet and the streetlights painted a soft geometry through the blinds, I took off my ring before bed the way I used to and placed it in the little dish. It made that delicate ceramic sound I love, the chime of an object finding home, and I thought about my brother saying get over it, and how what he meant was let me keep what I did without paying for it, and how what I did instead was teach him by not collapsing that payment is not cruelty, it's a currency by which we fund better futures. I lay there for a while, listening to the small city noises that have always sounded like possibility to me, and I felt the steadiness that comes when you refuse to be rewritten. If you're waiting for the part where I forgave him, it happened in lowercase, over many breakfasts where he remembered to bring milk, in text chains where he said I'm sorry without owing me a performance, in a Sunday where he showed up to help our mother fix a gutter without being reminded, in the way he now asks before he touches anything on my dresser. Forgiveness, it turns out, is less like opening a gate and more like sanding a rough edge each time you catch your hand on it. Get over it will never be my favorite sentence. But get through it might be. And if you are holding something in your palm that someone told you to drop because it makes them uncomfortable to see you carrying it, here's what I can tell you from the little bench where I make circles into declarations. You are allowed to keep what is yours. You are allowed to name harm without apologizing for it. You are allowed to be both a soft person and a steel hinge. And if someone takes your ring, literal or otherwise, you are allowed to follow the evidence back to yourself, to say mine still, to mark it where only you can read it, and to build the rest of your life around the certainty that you noticed, you spoke, and you did not, despite pressure and wishful thinking, get over anything that needed you to get through.